natural resource for all life. Makes up 71% of our planet. We swim in it, we bathe in it, and drink it. Water is what gives us life, and without it, there would be no life. For the thousands of years, humans have relied on water to create power and agriculture. However, what can create can also destroy. This is the story of the Waterways of Ellicott City.
Ellicott City, the community in Howard County, Maryland, was first founded by the Ellicott brothers in 1772. Residents historically utilized the Patapsco and Tiber rivers to turn mills and generate electricity. Today, this historic downtown, known as Old Ellicott City, is a tourist spot for shops, restaurants, and other residential properties.
So originally, when the town was established in the late 1700s, the people here built their homes and community along the Patapsco River. So the town that you see today didn't exist. And when the Patapsco River would flood, it would destroy the town. And so for several floods, the townspeople were rebuilding, and then they finally recognized, like, this is not solving our problem. We need to move the town. And that's when the town began to work its way up Main Street as we know it today. But its relationship really correlates with the Ellicott brothers and coming to this town and creating a mill town. What they did was they manipulated the riverbeds in such a way to speed up the water so they could create electricity.
Back then, you definitely needed water and water power to operate those mills. So after looking up and down the river, this is one of the places they chose, and they thought it was a really good area.
It was built along the banks of the Patapsco River because of the power of the water to drive the industry that came here and that settled here and that built this town.
The 1800s, they had a big storm in Howard County. There was over 18 inches of water that fell in just a couple hours.
The flood of 1868 transformed the entire Patapsco River Valley. Sykesville used to be on the Howard County side. The 1868 flood completely wiped out Sykesville, and when they rebuilt the town on higher ground on the Carroll County side.
Well, unfortunately, we knew what we were doing. So that's the other thing, too, because we knew how to respond to it. The first time, it was like, okay, what do we do next? What do we do next? We got to do this, then we got to do this, then we got to do this. The second time, it's just like, okay, now just go do it. You know how to do it. You've done it once. It's a combination of all of it. It's just, development versus the change in climate versus the geographical location. It's just one of those perfect storm areas that when things line up, it's like you hit the slot machine. And, but this is not the kind of jackpot that we want to hit. Look at the impact on the town. If it's going to totally destroy your town, what good is it? Because then you just have an empty town with all this flood mitigation, but you've lost that community, you've lost that historicalness of our area, and once, like I said, once you lose that, it's gone.
The catastrophic flooding we've experienced has also caused a tear in the fabric. Each time there's a major flood, there are people who move away, businesses that don't come back, relationships that get frayed out of that. So not addressing the catastrophic flooding, continuing to study really isn't a realistic option because it will eventually cause the downtown to die.
The largest contributing to flooding really is the topography that we're dealing with. It's a steep incline, and when we have a lot of rain in a short period of time, which has certainly been our experience in the 2016 and 2018 floods, the water is moving so quickly from the top down that it's creating a wall of water, so there's no time for the ground to absorb the water. And we have a lack of places for that stormwater to go. We don't have appropriate management in place. And even today, let's say, for instance, we did have what would be classified as appropriate stormwater management, we still wouldn't have enough to hold back the amount of water that these microstorms are creating over our community.
Main Street is nothing more than a big chute going down. And so when that water started getting, 2, 3, 4 inches on Main Street at the top, and then it got more and more and more because it started clogging the different parts behind the houses, and it just continued to overflow into Main Street. And by the time those storms were over, the water going down Main Street was, like 6 feet deep.
Although not perhaps exclusively to blame, land use and how we've managed stormwater in the past, in the recent past, is to blame. And the good news about that is it's something that we can change.
The four streams, it's the amount of water falling at the same time, the way the city's built on the hills, and the lack of the right infrastructure. So it all is kind of put together.
And although we've had these top-down floods before, they definitely seem they're more violent now. And that can certainly be attributed to overdevelopment, to the clogging of the waterways, and all the things that the county's trying to deal with now.
The floods of 2016 and 2018 were both very significant in their respects. However, the real magnitude and gravitas of the aftermath could be told in statistics. The flooding event of 2016 statistic-wise was the more impactful storm. Well over half a foot of rainfall was measured, with just under 1.5 inches of it falling in the span of 10 minutes, and over 4.5 inches of it falling in the span of an hour. In addition, streams overflowed, some at or near record levels. Some peaked as much as 8.5 feet above flood stage. This was an additional catalyst for all the severe flooding that occurred. With all these statistics, it's unfortunately no surprise that Ellicott City endured the worst damage from flooding it saw in many decades. The Patapsco River at Ellicott City reached over 128 feet. The Patapsco River at Patapsco Valley State Park not only reached major flood stage, but also shattered the previous record. Rainfall totals in many time spans at Ellicott City were absolutely absurd, and the streams I just mentioned about, 8 of the 11 shown on this graph had the top 5 peak levels on record. Peak levels that have not been seen in almost a century. Yes, there are gaps in records in some of these locations, but to have those water levels in Ellicott City is absolutely insane. Now on to the most recent flooding event that occurred in 2018. The storm that was responsible for this event produced similar rainfall, over 1/2 foot in 3 hours measured in Ellicott City. In some locations, Doppler radar estimated rainfall totals of 9 inches plus. In addition, most streams had some form of moderate flooding. Here are some more graphs to show you. The Hudson Branch at Ellicott City had major flooding, and the Patapsco at Valley State Park once again had major flooding. However, the Patapsco at Ellicott City saw moderate flooding at modest. With all this said, the city still managed to flood for now the second time in 2 years, exposing the issue of being flood prone and raising more concern that was already high.
I don't have much hope for it. I mean, with what they were talking before about when they were going to tear the buildings down, it still wasn't going to stop the town from flooding. The same amount of water, in my opinion, would still come down. And it's just that it would destroy the buildings if they're gone. But unless they do something at the top of the hill to take care of the water, I forget what they call them, those, not reservoirs, they're like a dam. They dig a big hole for the catch the water before it comes down here. I mean, I don't have much faith in that right now.
Only 4 people died in the last 2 floods, but that's 4 people too many. And so creating an environment where we look at the realities of climate change, the realities that these storms are getting stronger, more frequent, and adjusting the buildings and the landscape down there so that we can accommodate and adapt to this changing environment until we really take climate change seriously.
The most important thing is that we're out of time. We're running a time crunch. So you don't act for the sake of acting. You don't act out of panic. You don't act out of desperation. You don't let that cloud your vision as to what's best. The plan that was in place only decreased the water heights by about 2 feet. And that's not sufficient. That is not an answer. We're looking at all alternatives. They've got to take this much further or this town is doomed.
As of the making of this film, there's no final plan to mitigate floodwater in Ellicott City. The Kittleman plan to remove historic buildings has been largely set aside, reopening the debate. The new Howard County Executive Calvin Ball plans to bolster Howard County's emergency public alert system, increase debris removal from streams, and construct upstream floodwater retention facilities. While many shops and businesses remain closed and many historic buildings have their fates undecided, some have reopened and are trying their best to survive the ever-present fear of yet another flood.
Calvin Ball, the newly elected county executive, has great concerns about his predecessor's 5-year flood mitigation plan for Ellicott City. In a WTOP interview, Ball said, "I want to make sure people feel safe in Ellicott City. Work towards getting as much of the water off the streets as quickly as possible, while still preserving the historic character and nature that makes Ellicott City a destination." In all sincerity, Ball says, "I want to make sure that to the extent possible, we can meet all of our goals, which include preserving the historic nature of some of those buildings."